JT Crowley is Talking Books. On the show, you'll hear from emerging talent and seasoned veterans from around the world.
Hello everyone, I'm JT Crowley. I'm the host of Talking Book Show on Web Talk Radio. And today I'm very excited to welcome back Mel Harrison to talk about his sixth book in the Alex Boyd thriller series. The book is headed up Crescent City Carnage, and it is set primarily in New Orleans. And you can expect the usual style from Mel here. It's a heart-pumping story littered with unexpected surprises, just like all the other 5 books in the series, everybody. Packed full of excitement, intrigue, and he's going to get your heart pumping with the storyline. So what's it about? Well, I'm not going to tell you because I'm going to invite Mel back onto the show to tell us a little bit about himself and this literary masterpiece of his. So Mel, would you care to come back and have a chat with me again and join me on the show?
Hi, John. Good to be back talking to you. I enjoyed our last podcast a lot. So in this book, we have a domestic setting. It's the only one of my 6 books that has that. My own background was in the American Foreign Service, the U.S. State Department, specifically diplomatic security. I was a special agent, and when we're overseas, we're called regional security officers. And the name implies that usually set in an embassy or consulate, and we cover other territory as well. And we are the overseas law enforcement and counterterrorism unit, counterintelligence unit of the State Department. But we work with other agencies, FBI, CIA, DEA, but at embassies, we are in charge of everyone's security as long as we work for the ambassador. My wife is also in the Foreign Service. She was an administrative officer. So this time I decided, as I said, I take it away from overseas because DS, diplomatic security, does have field offices all around the United States. I'm not even sure how many, they keep expanding. So they have one in New Orleans, and New Orleans is a city dear to my heart. My wife grew up there. We visit there, we've lived there as a married couple. I said she grew up there. And I just think it's got a unique culture and worthy of storytelling. So that's why I picked it. I mean, most people who read these kind of novels have some familiarity with the West Coast and New York, maybe DC, but you don't find too many stories set in New Orleans. And they've got everything there. They've got corruption, they've got steamy climate, they've got great food, and they've got violence. So for me, it was a perfect setting.
There you go, everyone. Now you know why it's set there and a little bit about it. Now, Mel, I just want to refresh the audience with the 2 main characters, Alex Boyd and Rachel Smith. Can you very briefly outline their characteristics?
Yeah, thank you. Alex Boyd is a special agent with diplomatic security. He's been a regional security officer several times, 5, 6 times. He and Rachel are both assigned to London now, and they've taken this vacation to New Orleans at the request of Simone Ardoin. We'll get into that later. But Alex has been in some violent places like Pakistan. He's also been in some places like Rome that you thought would be a paradise, but when the ambassador got kidnapped, we had to swing into action. Rachel is also a professional in the Foreign Service. She started out as a press officer, and now she's a political counselor, meaning the top political dog in the embassy in London. They're both former athletes. He played college basketball at Virginia. She played varsity tennis at UCLA. So they're very fit. He's about 40 years old. She's a little younger, around 35 or so. They're both tall. He's 6'2" and about 210 pounds. She's 5'10", about 160. And as I said, they're athletes, so they can fight if they have to. But two of the key factors is they're really smart, and they've got great senses of humor, which they play off against one another all the time. They're always teasing each other, and they have a passionate relationship. And they're just a very well-matched couple.
They are. So let's see a little bit more about them in this latest book of his. As I said, it's the 6th book in the Alex Boyd thriller series, everybody. Now, there are 53 chapters in this book. And as I says, there's lots of twists and turns, and it's packed full of action. And we're not going to go into all the 53 chapters because A, we'll be here all day, and B, it's not the purpose of the podcast. The purpose of the podcast is to give you a brief outline as to what you can expect from this thrilling book. And if you really want to know what all the book is about, well, I've got a very, very simple answer for you. Go and get it. It's very riveting, and I thoroughly enjoyed reviewing it. Now, just to whet your appetite, Mel and I have chosen 9 chapters to highlight and go through so as you can get a feel for the book. Now, the first chapter that I want to go to, everybody, is chapter 3. And that chapter is headed up Playing with Fire. And here we find the character Simone. What's she up to? Well, Simone, unwisely, I would say, is trailing Jules Baptiste, a highly unsavourable person. She's been warned off by Alex and Rachel not to approach certain characters. So, going against their advice, Simone really is playing with fire. Going into dubious bars in the New Orleans area on her own, asking questions. Mel, can you set the scene for us here and give us a brief outline as to the character of Simone, how you created this character, and the character Jules Baptiste and Claude Toussaint? Some of these characters aren't very nice, are they?
Okay, John, it'd be my pleasure to talk about the chapter. To set the scene, excuse me, in the prior chapter, Simone Ardoin, Alex, and Rachel are having lunch together in Galatoire's, a famous restaurant on Bourbon Street in the French Quarter. And she reveals that the day before, he spotted Jules Baptiste walking in the quarter. Now, her prior overseas assignment, Simone's prior assignment, he was in charge of non-immigrant visas at the American Embassy in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And that's where Baptiste is from. He's a Haitian citizen. And she knows he's a gang leader, he's a criminal, he's involved in visa, passport fraud, and drugs. And yet, there he is, walking in the French Quarter. So Alex and Rachel warn off, and say that was impetuous, that was a mistake. We know this guy is violent. Now that we're aware of it, we'll bring in our diplomatic security office here in New Orleans. They'll work with NOPD, New Orleans Police Department, and they'll find out how he got here and what he's up to. Don't do it again. Don't follow him. So she reluctantly agrees. So the meal's over. They part ways. This is where the chapter 3 opens up. Alex and Rachel go one way to see the Mississippi River, a couple blocks away. And Simone is going to catch a cab at the hotel to go back home. Her parents are longtime residents of New Orleans. And lo and behold, she spots Baptiste walking rapidly on a side street with two of his colleagues. He can't resist. He's got to follow them. Alex and Rachel are too far away to yell out. He could use her cell phone, but he's afraid if she stops to talk, she'll lose Baptiste. But she follows him. In fact, it's into some of the same bars. She loses him and goes out a back door. But she's naive. For all of her brain power, like many young Foreign Service officers, he's naive. He talks to the bartender at this bar and leaves her calling card, the business card, does the same thing with some of the patrons, tries to get a lead. First the bartender claims he doesn't know until it's Baptiste. And then finally he pretends that it clicks in his brain and he says Baptiste has an associate called Claude Toussaint. Now Toussaint is a local New Orleanian, he's not from Haiti, but he's got a Haitian name, if you will, a French name. Not unusual in New Orleans. And he says they've had a falling out, Toussaint and Baptiste. Maybe Toussaint will talk to you. Well, it's pretty obvious to the reader this is going to be a setup. But Simone goes home. We flash forward to that evening, 10:30 at night, she gets a call. 10 at night, she gets a call from Toussaint. He wasn't expecting a direct call. He wants to meet. He says he can't do it the next day. He'll be out of town. And she agrees to meet him to find out what's going on with Baptiste and the visa scam and why he's there. I mean, she suspects he's smuggling Haitians into with fake IDs, fake passports, visas to work, the dishwashers, cleaners, whatever job they can get, and he takes the cut. And he's also in the drug trade. So her plan to meet Claude occurs, but it doesn't go well for her. I'll leave it at that, I think.
Anybody else would have had a notion, everybody, don't go there. But oh no, Simone goes there. I will say no more at the moment. Oh dear. Chapter 6, Condolences. Mel, this is you telling the audience, the viewers, the readers, that Simone has been killed. So this is a pivotal chapter as far as I can see. And this is you setting up the narrative as to what's coming down the line. Would you care to open up a little here as to what's going on without spoiling the audience's expectations?
Yeah, I would. I wanted to create a few chapters that were tearjerkers. And so just before the chapter, at the end of the prior chapter, Simone had left before she was murdered. He left voicemail on Alex's cell phone and Rachel, but they had their phones turned off because they were in a jazz club in a place called Faubourg Marigny, which is adjacent to the French Quarter. So they never got the message until they returned to their hotel that night. They turn on their phones and they're really worried. Simone describes who she's going to meet, what it's all about. And they try and call her that night, but there's no answer, of course. The next morning, they expect her to be alive and at home. They call again on her cell phone, no answer. So they call the home number. That evening, coming up, they were supposed to have dinner at Simone's house to meet her parents. Ed Ardoin, known as Papa Ed, the friend, and Camille, the mother. And so they have the number. And they live in uptown New Orleans, a wealthy part of town, very upscale, nice homes, some large homes, lots of oak trees, everything. It's idyllic. So they call and they get Camille on the line. She can barely talk. So Papa Ed takes over, and he tells him that the daughter, Simone, has been murdered. So they agree to go to the house. That's why it's called Condolences. And while they're there, they meet two NOTB officers. One is Captain Wells, who's a close friend, old friend, 30-year friend of Ed Ardoin, and the detective in charge of the case, Tim Kelly. And that's where more details are revealed. And it gives the reader a chance to see what kind of a family Simone is from, the significance of her parents. Ed owns his own law firm. He's a big political player in the city. They're African American, which you get by reading it. And we've been big in the civil rights movement. There's presidents and everything. His wife is a doctor and a socialite. And it gives you a sense of the middle upper class African American Creole community in the city.
It's a fascinating part of the book, and that's why when I was looking and reviewing the book, everybody, I thought, I want to go to this section. And now I want you to take you all to chapter 11, everybody. And this is a celebration of life. And the scene here is Dukey's Chaser's restaurant in a low middle income area of New Orleans. The restaurant is quite locally well known for its Creole cuisine. So it's quite an important chapter, and the scene is very, very interesting. The restaurant itself is fascinating, which Mel goes into, talking to you, describing what it looks like. But that's not the real reason as to why Mel has written this chapter. It's clearly, this is the pre-reception to the funeral service that follows on in chapter 12. But for me, this chapter, Condolences, is about who's there at the reception. What's their connection with Simone? And so it's an ideal opportunity for Alex, Rachel, and the New Orleans Police Department to do some discreet snooping around. Who knew Simone? Who did she mingle with and why? And what clues could be picked up here? So Mel, would you care to elaborate as to the plot line here? And again, without giving too much away.
Sure, John. Thank you. I think you hit the nail on the head on why they're at the restaurant. Dukey Chase's restaurant has been around since 1941. It's a Black-owned restaurant, like you said, in the middle class area. The restaurant goes back to the time of segregation, and it's very significant in the city. Now, everybody goes there, whites, blacks, it doesn't matter what you are. The food is spectacular. My wife and I are eating there. But just a little tiny bit of history on the restaurant. Back in the 40s and 50s, early 60s, you had these ocean-going freighters that would come into town, unload at the port, and you had some black sailors. When they weren't resident, they'd say they'd get their paycheck. They had nowhere to cash it. They didn't have a bank account. They wouldn't do it. But Dukey Chase would cash their checks. And so it became very well known for that reason, and the food was always spectacular. Well, back to the Ardoin connection. Because of this linkage, Ed and Camille have been going to that restaurant for decades. And there's a tradition among them and their friends that on Tuesdays they have lunch together. And when Simone was a little girl, before she was doing the fine service, when school was out, she would go along with them, and she knew these people growing up. The Ardoins invite Alex and Rachel to come and talk to the group about their daughter, about how she became an accomplished foreign service officer, about her assignments in life. They're a little reluctant to intrude on this private aspect, like Camille pleads with them, and they do. So now you see a slice of upscale New Orleans, political New Orleans. But in attendance is the mayor, the chief of police, is Captain Wells that I mentioned before, the mixture of white and black. You have attorneys, you have prosecutors, you have doctors, professors, in short, kind of a who's who of the city. And there are about 20 people there. And this is their typical lunch group on Tuesday. So Alex and Rachel are introduced to the group. They're introduced to this culture that most tourists would never see. And of course, they have a very good meal. And by the way, every restaurant in the book, my wife and I have eaten at, and we've had the items on the menu that Alex and Rachel eat. So there you are. It's Simone and, it's Papa Ed and Camille getting great satisfaction that Alex and Rachel can describe what a wonderful career, short career, her daughter had. By the way, Simone, the murdered girl, was only in her early 30s.
Have you noticed how Mel has tried all these restaurants out in this book? And then he's decided, I'll put them in. I wonder if he's been to some restaurants and didn't like them, so no, I'm not going to put that one in.
Exactly.
Who knows? Now, what I like about your book, Mel, and all your other books as well, is that you head the chapters up. And I really appreciate when an author heads all the chapters up, because the chapter hints at what the audience, the reader, the viewer can expect within that chapter. And that's what appeals to me. And when I see a book and there are no headings to the chapter, I'm thinking, oh, I need to have a chat with this author and say, you need to address this and put chapter headings in, because it's very, very important. And Mel's very good at doing this. So the chapter headings are giving you a clue as to what you can expect in this chapters, all the chapters. Now, chapter 15, break in the case. This one caught my attention. So I want to dig around this past part of the book. You start the chapter, Mel, by telling the reader Susan Witt is giving an abbreviated version of her phone call with Tommy Rogers, from the embassy. He's the embassy's RSO in Port-au-Prince in Haiti. We've got Westbrook, the character Westbrook there. We've got character Washington there. And of course, we've got Alex and Rachel. And they all decide to accompany Susan back to the DS office to read an email in the Ardoin case. What's going on here? The Haitian police unit, which tipped off Tommy Rogers, the RSO at the embassy, have discovered at Port-au-Prince there's a local thug called Emmanuel Thibault, and I hope I pronounced that right. And he has frequent contact with Jules Baptiste because they're in the visa fraud and drug smuggling business together. And you've already hinted at this right at the very beginning of the interview. So I thought, this chapter's very interesting. So I want to know where you're taking the audience and the reader here. And is it a break in the case?
Thank you, John. Yes, it is indeed a break in the case. In an earlier chapter, the police recovered Simone's cell phone. And after she saw Baptiste the first time, she called the embassy in American embassy in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and gets hold of the RSO, Tommy Rogers, and asked him to follow up on how Debo got there. He talked to the consular officers, and he's obviously an American visa. No one would grant this guy a visa in a million years. So that number is in her cell phone. So after she dies, Susan with Alex and Rachel are at the police department. They're going through her things with the NOPD. And the NOPD lets Susan go through the cell phone, and she comes across this number. So she calls it and finds out it's the RSO, Tommy Rogers. And Tommy can give her information that they didn't have in New Orleans. Basically, the gist of the conversation with Simone Ardoin. So he promises, Rogers promises to follow up with the Haitian police. And lo and behold, they find out who's there. We don't know if they've got an inside source in Baptiste's operations or whether they were tapping his phone, but they found out that Baptiste had been receiving, that the Haiti drug people in Baptiste's gang had been calling a number in a place called Mandeville, which is a suburb of New Orleans, across Lake Pontchartrain. Well, it's so easy to link that number to a house, to an address. And now they have at least one location that they can find, if not Baptiste, people in his gang. The police are having trouble locating Baptiste. He's known to move around. He's got safe houses all over the area, and he doesn't have a permanent residence in any of them. So with that, they have made a step ahead. Now, you mentioned the head of the FBI office, Bill Westbrook, is there. So NOPD and DS have brought in the FBI, not because they need them to prosecute the case, but because Simone was a commissioned officer in the federal government, a foreign service officer. Under law, FBI has a right to take over the case. In this instance, they're not doing it yet because they're comfortable with NOPD and DS taking the lead. There's also a crime task force which brings in DEA, but there's a drug angle. So it's kind of an all-hands-on-deck approach. So the FBI just wants Alex and Rachel to bring him up. Westbrook wants them to bring him up to speed on what's happening. And Westbrook has to answer to FBI headquarters in Washington, so he has to explain what's going on. When should they decide if they need to take charge, and will they? I mean, they may not. They don't do it all the time. It seems to be in good hands for now. So now they've got this other lead, and it's in Mandeville, and so Westbrook ranges for Sergeant Washington, who's taken over the case for NOPD, Alex and Rachel and Susan Witt, to go across the lake, meet the chief of police for St. Tammany Parish, which is a county in other states, but it's called parishes in Louisiana, and give them an update on this number, what they know about this residence in Mandeville, and to put it under surveillance. So again, we're expanding who's in the book. Now we've gone outside of New Orleans, and luckily St. Tammany Parish is a very good police department. I used to live there, so I'm biased. I like it.
You see, everybody, these chapters are packed with storylines and characters. Now, as I was scrolling through the chapters and through the titles, chapter 22 really caught my eye. The trap. It made me stop and think, what's Mel Harrison talking about here? Now, I'm going to quote the second paragraph, everybody. As I was saying, unless the NOPD gets a new report from a snitch, we don't know where to find Baptiste. Alex said, so we need to initiate action and draw him out, or at least find and arrest someone from his gang. Here we've got John Washington, we've got Susan Witt, we've got Alex and Rachel, and they're hatching a sting, everybody. It's a high-risk strategy. So my question to you, Mel, is who's going to play the undercover role here? Why do we need more protection for Billy and Moonglow, who we will talk about further in another chapter, everybody? And I think you're just teasing the audience here with what's unfolding in this part of the book. Am I right? Are you teasing us?
Always, John. That's part of the thrill of reading a thriller. You have to have some expectations. So, Mandeville is now behind us. There was a shootout. I won't go into it in depth because we have other chapters to talk about. But it didn't lead them to Baptiste. It did lead them to some thugs in his gang, but that wasn't good enough. Anyway, so they're at wit's end. How do we find Baptiste? Well, let's try and draw him out. So Alex has this idea. Let's send someone undercover into the bars that Simone Ardoin went in. We have a feeling one of the bartenders or more are working with Baptiste, and they will give him a call and at least follow the undercover, if not try to attack them. So they have to have a very good, solid plan to protect the undercover. And Alex has it in his head that he can do that. And Detective Washington and the NOPD points out that Alex isn't exactly a shy, easy target. He's a hunky guy, he's smart. And Rachel is beside herself that once again Alex is prepared to take a risk. So they put off for a while, deciding who will be the undercover. Meanwhile, Alex has arranged with DS headquarters to bring in more special agents to help protect. You mentioned Moonglow and Billy. They were witnesses to the murder. We haven't mentioned them yet, but they've become key as the story progresses. So lo and behold, two people arrived from the Houston field office of diplomatic security. One is named Isabel Lewis. As it turns out, Isabel is quite accomplished at undercover work. She was in a special DS unit that did that to help protect VIPs, the DS protection. And she also has an Army background. And so between her training in DS and the Army, and she went on temporary assignment when she was the assistant RSO in Caracas to Haiti, where she met Simone Ardoin, and she met some of the police, the Haitian police, and she knew about the visa fraud ring. She is the ideal candidate. So it's decided that Isabel will be the undercover. Now they just have to make sure while she's doing that, she can be kept alive.
And then as you see, everybody, the plot is thickening. Now, I want to go to chapter 31, and I deliberately picked out chapter 31, everybody, because I've already touched on the characters, Billy and Moonglow. And we've not really said to you who they are and why they need protecting. And they are very, very important. So chapter 31 headed up witness protection. And this is about protection of Billy and Moonglow, who I briefly mentioned, as I said, in the previous question. Now, they're significant and they play an important role in this novel of yours. So, can you tell us who are these two characters and why do they need more witness protection?
Delighted, John. So, Moonglow, her actual name is Janet Ross, but everybody calls her Moonglow. She's got multicolored hair, gold, purple, green, Mardi Gras colors. She's got tattoos all over her body. She works in a tattoo parlor. She's got a nose ring. She's got rings on her ears. She's kind of a freaky person, but she's got a lot of street smarts. She's young, early 20s. She is the boy's girlfriend of Billy Whiteman, who is a native New Orleanian. I should point out, Moonglow's from out of town. And they're living together in an apartment very close to the park where Simone Ardoin is murdered. Well, they were literally lying on a blanket in the park, making out, just enjoying the aromas of a park after a rain and all the trees and everything. When the murder occurs, they witnessed it, and they can identify Jules Baptiste. They know him from the French Quarter. And but nobody in Baptiste's organization saw that. So because some of evidence from their making out was found at the scene in the park, the police go to their apartment, introduce themselves, interview them. At first, Moonglow and Billy don't want any part of working with the police. They think they're going to get murdered. They know that witnessing sometimes don't make it to court. But they point out how special, the police point out how special Simone is, and they'd be doing a great public service. And they agree. So they need witness protection. Now, at this early stage, again, they're not known to Baptiste, but DS organizes it. They're going to provide some bodyguards. That's why Isabel Lewis is coming into town with a partner from Houston. NOPD will provide some bodyguards, and the Marshal Service, which has a decades-old agreement with diplomatic security for mutual support. So between the three agencies, they'll be able to provide 24-hour protection where they work, where their house is, and they're supposed to lie low. So meanwhile, while the cops and everybody is trying to find Baptiste, they're also protecting the only witnesses to the murder. At the same time, in the chapter, DS has activated what they call the Rewards for Justice program. It's a successful program in the State Department. DS has given out tens of thousands of dollars, maybe millions, I'm not sure how much, over decades, for snitches, for people that will provide, who, what, where, and when. And a guy has come forward who knows something about Jules Baptiste. He didn't see the murders, but he thinks he knows where Baptiste may be. So you've got more complications coming in, more characters. And as you know, John, from looking at all my books, I always have a section in the front of each book of acronyms and names so that the readers can just quickly flip back and say, oh, yeah, now I remember who this guy is or what this acronym is. I never want to leave somebody hanging where they say, gosh, I'm not familiar with this phrase. That's fortunate. I hate it when I come across a book like that. I try and minimize acronyms, but sometimes realistic dialogue requires it.
Yeah, you've got the main characters, right at the front of the book, their roles, what they do, and the departments and the embassies are all there as well. So that people can just go back to, just to remind themselves, which I quite like. And you can see that on the written introduction, which accompanies the podcast, because I've done it there as well. And when you look at the written version of the podcast, you'll see I've listed the chapters that we're talking about so that you can get a feel and a sense for this book. Now, Time is marching on here, so I want to march on to chapter 37. Undercover, another fascinating title. I think this is you, Mel Harrison, ratcheting up the storyline here as you dash for the finishing line. And we have Hank Devers, the DEA undercover agent, sitting nervously in downtown New Orleans bar. Can you spill the beans here without giving it, again, too much away?
Yeah, okay. So I mentioned the Rewards for Justice program, and they're offering a reward of BS's, State Department, of $50,000 for information leading to the arrest of Jules Baptiste and Claude Toussaint. By this time, they know they're the killers. But as I said, Baptiste is a gang, and it's hard to track them down. You got a lot of deadly associates. So the Rewards for Justice, it's an ad in the local Times-Picayune newspaper. It's on television and the nightly news. And the point of contact is either BS, the field office there, or NOTV. And as you can imagine, there are a lot of scammers who call and say, yeah, I got information. They just want the 50 grand. But there's one guy that calls, his name is Willie. And he seems really credible. And he believes he knows where Baptiste will be hanging out. Even though he moves around the area, this is one of his major places. And he won't come into the DS office or the police to talk. He's too knowledgeable. He knows there's places to watch. So he says, meet me in a bar in a part of town called Chantilly. Not a great area. Like all of New Orleans, it was once decimated by Hurricane Katrina, but it's slowly being built up. The bar survived only because of his brick and raised up off the ground. So it's been in operation for a long time. Well, it's in it's in a rough area, heavily African American as well, and Willie's African American. So Alex can't go in. He'll stand out like a sore thumb. And again, because of the drug angle, they're talking to a guy named Vern Bordelon. He's the regional director for DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration. Major players in American law enforcement. Vern says, I've got a guy in my office who's gone to that bar many times. We need informants, and we can use him. And the good news is he's transferring to another city. So even though his cover is going to be burned by meeting this guy, this snitch, it doesn't matter. He'll be out of town in a week. So they agree to do it. And the guy's name is Hank Devers. He's a very skilled undercover DEA agent. And he meets Willie, takes him back to a car down the street where Susan Witt, the head of the DS New Orleans office, and Alex were there. They got a map, although Willie can't really read a map. He can describe where this fishing camp is in the swamp. It's on the Pearl River, which is on the Mississippi-Louisiana border. That's part of southern Louisiana. And he gives them a pretty good idea of where they should look for Baptiste. If he happens to be there, he may not. He probably doesn't even own the camp, but he leases it. So it's a good kind of heart-pounding case where Devers goes into a bar. His head is now at his next assignment, but he's got to drag himself mentally back into undercover work in New Orleans. Willie's there. He wants the money. And it's another.
Oh, indeed. Yeah.
Another break.
Yeah, so the undercover agent has his work cut out, but he's experienced, everybody. And again, the twists to keep on turning in this epic book of Mel's. Now, I want to go to chapter 44 because it's headed up shocking developments. So very briefly, Mel, what are these shocking developments? And could you just give us a watered down version as to what they are? Because I don't want you to give the game away.
Yeah, okay. Well, this and the next one we're going to talk about. We talked not to give the game away, but I think I can do it. So Alex is very frustrated. They've been mostly on the defense. They've been responding to reports of where Baptiste might be, but they're not ahead of the game. They're always one step behind Baptiste. He's very clever, very smart criminal, moving around all the time. So he gets an idea and says, look, Baptiste is a foreign citizen. And we know he's been making calls to and from Haiti. Who better to contact to ask for help than the NSA, the National Security Agency? Readers may know they are our premier electronic intercept organization, phone calls, text messages. They're the guys that scour the internet. They're amazing. These algorithms, mathematical formulas, and I can't get into too much of their technique. So he calls his boss in Washington, Jim Riley, who appears in the book several times and has been in most of the book. And they agreed. Alex flies back to Washington. They have a meeting with NSA. Now they have to assure NSA that they're really going to be looking at a foreign citizen, as Jules Baptiste, because Congress, in reality, has been all over the NSA about spying on Americans. And if you followed American politics the last 4 to 8 years, you know that's a serious concern. You can listen to conversations, but you can collect metadata, which is basically the numbers, minutes talked, etc. But clearly, Alex is hoping that you're going to capture Jules Baptiste in a conversation with somebody in U.S. law enforcement. He skipped over some chapters, but Moonglow and Billy have been put under threat. Alex, Rachel, Susan Witt have been attacked. Somebody is giving inside information, law enforcement information to Baptiste.
Let's hold that thought. Let's hold that thought, everyone, because the final chapter I want to go to, everybody, is chapter 48, The Snitch. An inside job. Is it? This is a surprise twist here, Mel. Do you think your audience is going to be taken with this narrative here? Do not give too much away here. An inside job?
Okay, John. So the guy who's the snitch is, okay, I'm not going to tell you. Alex.
Don't give his name away.
Yeah. Alex, Rachel, and Susan Witt are pretty certain that the evidence points to one guy in law enforcement, and they would be wrong. And NSA becomes the hero of the day when they uncover some phone call to an unexpected, but known, but unexpected player. And it just changes everything dramatically. And it doesn't help them per se know where Baptiste is going next, but they do try to figure out who's working with them inside.
And that's enough for that, everybody.
Yeah.
That's the book. The sixth book in the Alex Boyd thriller series. And I hope we've whet your appetite enough to want to go out and get it. So, Mel, any more books coming down the line?
It's a good question. I have two in mind, and I've partially written 10 to 20 chapters in each one, because I couldn't decide where I wanted to focus on. The prior book, Spies Among Us, was set in London, but we were only a year into Alex and Rachel's 3-year course, maybe 4 years. So I thought, well, I should follow up with a book set in London. And your readers may know from the back jacket of my bio, I had 2 3-year tours in London, 3 in the 80s, 3 in the 90s. And we go there all the time. So I love the place. I love the countryside as well. So I thought I need a follow-up story to this Spies book. And this would be a terrorism book. It would be on a larger scale than some of the prior ones. But I also had something else in mind. And this is going in an entirely new direction. It's easy when you're on a roll, when you've got the same protagonist, the major player. But I wanted to test myself to see how good of a writer am I.
Oh.
I thought, let me put aside Alex and Rachel for now. Not done with them, but for now. Let me have a new character, in this case, Max Hungerford, and they won't have anything to do with diplomatic security. I decided to set it in Sicily, and I've written about 10 chapters there. Max is he didn't retire from the CIA, he just did 10 years. But while he was there, he had some business dealings in Sicily with a mafia don. And it turned out that Don, his wife, had gone to school in the United States with Max. Her parents wanted to give her up. An education.
So there you go, everybody. He's got more action-packed books coming. And if you look behind him, the pictures on the wall there, a lot of those pictures are from London. And all I'm thinking of was, if he's come back to London, he better call me and I'll go down to London and we'll meet up finally and have lunch together. Because yes, Mel's from Florida in the US, but I'm from Derby in the United Kingdom. London is common ground for us both.
The pint's on me.
Oh, yes. Now, who do you want, to read your books? Who's your audience that you're targeting?
That's a good question. In fact, it's one of the first questions every writer could ask themselves. So for me, it's people that love action, thrillers, adventure, danger, exotic locations. Although maybe we don't think of London as exotic, but it's I do. But I've got them in Pakistan, Rome, Cairo, now New Orleans. People who frankly like complex characters, like good food, don't mind seeing their protagonists put in harm's way. So for me, I try not only to tell a story, but to do some character development and to enlighten the reader about foreign locations, places they probably haven't been or may not have been, and to give them a sense, at least in my early books, of what diplomatic security was all about. I mean, let's face it, relative to organizations like FBI, Secret Service, CIA, diplomatic security is a small service. Now there are about 2,000 special agents, so it was much smaller when I joined. And yet we're on the front lines. Every embassy is dealing with terrorism and espionage. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice to bring the reader into this world and they can see what we're dealing with? And it's not always pleasant. I mean, it can be glamorous in some places, Paris and Rome, London, but it's places like Pakistan, Cairo, you wouldn't call it glamorous, you'd call it exciting and fascinating. So you deal with everything from bad guys to bad food to bad hygiene, but it's the real world. And so
it's the real world, everyone. And it's the real world that Mel Harrison's put in his books. So where can people get your books from, Mel?
Okay, they're on Amazon.com, and they're in paperback and e-reader. You can probably get them, order them through Barnes and Noble. I know at least one of the books has been ordered repeatedly there. But Amazon's the easiest way to do it and the fastest way to get it. People often ask if I have an audio version. I don't. Yeah, I'm not sure how big the market is. And after all, I hope to at least break even, if not make a profit. So I've held off on the Audible books. I apologize to those people that would prefer that. But the e-reader and the paperback are pretty good.
Excellent. So, Mel, it just leaves me to say thank you so much for coming back on my show again to talk about your latest book, the sixth in the series, and which I found is just absolutely fascinating. So, thank you very much for joining me once again.
John, thank you for the opportunity. I thoroughly enjoy it. I can tell by your questions, you read the books in depth, and I appreciate that. And I'm sure the listeners to the podcast appreciate it as well.
I do a lot of research into the books, everyone, because I have to get the questions out. That is so important. So as to give you a good tale, everyone. So, I'm JT Crowley. Thanks for listening wherever you're in the world. Until next time, stay safe.
Bye-bye.